Okay, hello again, everyone. We're ready to start our next session on insurance and liability. I know this is a topic that many people have asked me questions about, and my answer has always been, I have no idea. So I'm eagerly looking forward to this panel, and I'd like to introduce first Katelyn Magney-Miller, who is the Communications Director for Partners of Automated Vehicle Education, PAVE, which is a wonderful collaborative organization. It's a coalition of industry, nonprofit, and academic institutions working to educate the public about automated vehicles. So in her role, Katelyn leads the development of communications and media strategies for public education and outreach programs. She also serves on the board of directors and manages marketing for women in automotive technology, WAT, a diverse group of female subject matter experts who are passionate about driving advances in the automotive and new mobility industry. So please welcome Katelyn to the podium, please.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. I don't want to be up here all alone, so I'm just going to have Ben come on up. Ben Lewis of Simulytic is going to be joining me, and we're going to do a little bit of a fireside chat on AVs and insurance. And thank you, Denver, for introducing me. But yeah, maybe we can just get started with an intro from you, Ben. Tell us about yourself and the work you do at Simulytic.
Yeah, sure. Is this on? Okay, there we go. Yeah, thanks, Katelyn. So Ben Lewis, I'm VP of Business Development at Simulytic. We offer risk intelligence on autonomous vehicle deployments to insurance companies. We do that using simulation technology and synthetic data. So what that really means is we take the same types of simulation technology that the AV companies use for testing and validation. We use that to model out digital twins of AV deployments, and then we capture data out of that simulated world. We turn it into metrics and offer that to insurance companies and their underwriting teams, folks on the risk assessment side, folks maybe in the claims organization, all around deploying level 4 AV tech onto the road, and across the various use cases that we've touched on the panels throughout the event. My background's from the insurance industry, so we're a bit of a tech company at Simulytic, but prior to that, I spent some time at a company called Edge Case Research, which focuses on the very technical system safety engineering work that the companies are doing to validate the systems. And then before that, I was at Liberty Mutual for about 10 years and got Liberty launched into the AV space back in about 2016 or so. We were insuring our first accounts in the autonomous vehicle industry.
So if you have questions on the intersection of AVs and insurance, Ben is your guy. So let's sort of level set with kind of a basic question for those who aren't familiar with insurance in the automotive industry. Can you tell us how it works, how it's regulated, and then also sort of how that works on the just semi-truck side as well?
Yeah, there's a lot to it, but I guess the key points are that one, insurance is primarily a state-regulated industry. So each of the 50 states and then DC and Puerto Rico have departments of insurance or departments of financial services and insurance commissioners, and those agencies regulate insurance on a state-by-state basis. That varies from, and then I guess that could be split, I guess you could say, between primarily personal lines insurance for individuals, think all the policies that we're all purchasing for our cars and our homes, and then commercial lines insurance for businesses. In the automotive space, there are some rules about carrying auto insurance and the coverage that has to be included in that. But by and large, I guess the biggest thing that kind of sticks out when you talk about regulating insurance is the limit requirements. So for personal auto policies, those limit requirements, the minimum financial responsibility rules tend to be pretty low. And I'm not an insurance agent, but I might recommend you purchase more than the minimum limit. In most states, it's $25,000 or so for for the sort of part, the injured party, and then up to maybe $50,000 in aggregate for a crash. On the commercial side, those limits are typically much higher. And then as we get into the AV industry, the sort of trucking application of that, and then the other applications, things like ride hail, you start to see requirements go up quite a bit. So generally speaking, autonomous vehicle companies and the industry as a whole are purchasing primary auto insurance limits of $1 million or more. Most of them have insurance programs that go up into the tens or maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars of total coverage. But that, I guess wrapping all of that up is really the key regulated insurance is auto insurance. And I think as we get through the Q&A, we'll talk more about the fact that that's not really the only kind of insurance that you might argue is important for AVs. But from a regulatory perspective, that sets maybe sort of the floor. You have to purchase auto insurance. Typically, you have to purchase a minimum limit. For these applications, we're talking usually millions of dollars in limit. And the coverage is, primarily for your liability if you were to cause a crash.
Yeah, so you've kind of touched on this already. Can you get a little bit more into how AVs and autonomous trucks are being insured, and sort of have these companies had to sort of reinvent the wheel, or are insurers using and like adapting existing models?
Yeah, so far, I mean, even though some of the members of the space, like Liberty, have been in it for a decade or more, I mean, really, the tool set, I guess, that they're applying is the existing one, a sort of traditional one. So, the insurance for an AV company is going to look today generally a lot like what the insurance policy or the coverage set looks like for any trucking company, for any transportation network company that operates a ride hail service. Just take the use case and you can basically apply the framework that's out there for any traditional company to the AV companies. I think we'll start to see that change, particularly now that commercialization is picking up at quite a pace, and we're seeing driver operations, we're seeing revenue generating operations more so. I think the industry is already starting to respond to that and say, maybe the policy that we sell to anybody who operates a transportation business, and frankly, the policy that we've sold to folks that own cars and trucks for 100 years now doesn't work quite right for a driver out, commercial AV operation. And so I think, that framework will evolve. I think, particularly right now, we're starting to see signs of that product innovation happening.
Really interesting. Can you talk more about how you see this current approach evolving in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big ways that I think the industry is looking at changing the insurance offering, is bringing together multiple types of coverage that would otherwise be siloed. So I've talked I guess mostly about auto insurance here, which again is kind of the focal point because it's the most regulated aspect of these companies' insurance programs. But again, there's other key coverages here that while it might not be a regulatory requirement, any prudent risk manager is going to be purchasing other kinds of insurance coverage and leveraging other types of risk management, other risk management techniques to properly protect their business. And so, instead of going from a world where the focus is on auto insurance for AV deployments, I think we're going to start to see bundled coverage, almost like an AV policy, so to speak, that takes in other important coverages across, product liability exposure, exposure to cyber threats and sort of malicious intrusions, tech errors and omissions, which is all about building and engineering technology products and the sort of professional liability you take on when you do that. So I think today companies are sort of cobbling that together, with duct tape and super glue. And there might be one or two players out there that have started to get into maybe a bundled offering. But I think now that we're seeing the industry kind of say, the AV industry kind of say, our risk management needs are evolving in kind of a unique way. What are you going to do to respond to that? The insurance industry is starting to think more about the next generation of insurance, and that next generation being specifically built for with AVs in mind.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity for sort of innovation in this space in the years to come. Now, AVs and autonomous trucks cover a lot of different ODDs, or operational design domains. How do insurers evaluate risks associated with these different ODDs? Obviously, driving in San Francisco is very different from driving in North Dakota, in Grand Forks. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, today the level of granularity when it comes to location or sort of that bigger definition of an ODD is somewhat limited, at least in terms of how insurers kind of look at it and try to leverage that information to make decisions about accepting risk and then putting a price on it. And it's there's probably a few levels of how it's limited, but one of the big ones is that insurers tend to assign rates when you're talking about location or geography according to things like where the vehicle is garage, radiuses of operation around that, zip code levels, like level information in the data. And so the cool thing about AVs, and I mean, one thing we focus a lot on at Simulytic is that the amount of data coming off of the AV systems, the way that deployments are mapped and the ODDs are defined, the way simulation can be leveraged to look at these environments. There's a real big opportunity for insurers to go down to a level of granularity and detail in that data that they've never been able to access and take advantage of before. And so for ODDs and locations, one thing, I mean, we work on with our customers, but I think we're seeing generally in the industry is, how do I get to a higher level of fidelity on risk, not for my zip code, in Massachusetts, and all the drivers who live or operate in that area, but the risk for this intersection, the risk for this part of the interstate highway nearby my home, if you're operating not, and then layering on top of that not just that location, but it's a medium haul from a warehouse to a distribution center. Does that influence the risk in that location? Is it a long haul Class 8 semi truck? Do they have different rules about what the maneuvers the vehicle can undertake? So I think that kind of information, and it's not used today. It's not quite the Stone Age, but the insurance industry has somewhat of almost like a governor on the kinds of information it can take advantage of. But there's almost it's like there's a lot of untapped potential that I think we're just starting to dig into with AVs. It doesn't. We have to go through. Insurance companies have to go through almost the same validation process that an AV company does. It's just that the validation is this physical product, this vehicle that I'm going to put on the road going to be safe. It's validation of is this data a signal on risk? Because I need to know if it's credible. I need to know if it's reliable to tell me about the risk I'm insuring. And so that process has to be gone through. But I think we're starting to see that insurers see the data opportunity here and they want to take advantage of that.
Yeah, really interesting to hear how much more granular you can evaluate risk with data. And I want to switch gears a little bit here. PAVE does a lot of engagements with the public. And one of the common questions we get is around cybersecurity and hacking into autonomous systems. Is that something that insurers are taking into account at this point?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely are. I think, again, there's sort of a reliance on what's been tried and tested. And so the coverages, the underwriting techniques, the risk assessment techniques that have been applied for other technology companies, companies operating social media sites or in e-commerce or operating maybe sort of lesser robotic systems. Those things are applied, copy and pasted, so to speak, I guess, to the AV risks here. I would say though that there is a big focus right now in the industry on maybe two aspects that are particularly relevant for AVs. One is the connection now between the cyber sort of digital world and the physical world, and the fact that there can be the digital world can influence what happens in the physical world. So how do you think about that kind of cyber risk versus more sort of traditional data breach risk that's out there. And then the other thing that has gained some attention recently is with these systems that aggregate a lot of risk and centralize it in sort of one place is business interruption risk. So maybe there's not a lot of risk from a safety perspective. Maybe there's not a lot of risk from a data privacy perspective. But what happens if a system that that Navy relies on goes down, and the best decision the company can make from a safety perspective is to stand down the fleet, to pull it offline. Well, that fleet is being relied on to generate revenue, and so the fact that there's a system that isn't functioning, that is causing the fleet to have to stay off the road, there's now a liability risk there to the customers that you've promised to generate revenue for. And so that's another thing the industry is starting to look more at, especially as you start to see this get more concentrated, because you need to worry about the aggregation issue that comes with that.
Yeah, interesting to think about those other kinds of risks and issues that come up that aren't necessarily relevant in our world today. I kind of want to come back to this idea around data. Obviously, AVs and autonomous trucks are producing so much more data than traditional vehicles. Can you talk more about what this means for insurance, and are there considerations around data and its application to insurance underwriting and coverage that maybe those in the public sector should have in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the key point is the one we talked about earlier, which is just that there's kind of a new world for insurers to look at as far as the granularity of data that's available, the leading indicators of risk versus looking at a lot of lagging data. Like one of the biggest thing that insurers look at are historical losses. And so if we're in a world where today there isn't really a loss history to rely on, how do you deal with that? And that's why we exist at Simulytic. We help companies think about the future before wheels are on the ground and sort of cars hit the road. But the other thing is, how do we just kind of even once loss data or a history develops, a driving history develops, how do we move away from looking backwards to look forwards? That's a very sort of bedrock piece of how insurers do their job. And so I think as we said earlier, just a lot of new data to look at and to evaluate, especially for those leading indicators of risk. I think the other thing, though, just another sort of fairly simple point, is that insurers are they're a stakeholder that's a little bit like regulators and public agencies. And so there are certainly very technical folks in those organizations that can help kind of break things down and even provide new perspective on data as far as what it means for a risk signal. But they're not software engineers, they're not systems engineers. And so to some degree, even for me, with what we do at Simulytic, and then in my prior role at EdgeCase, there's a really key role here, I think, for intermediaries to play, who can bridge that gap between the very technical, vast data sets that could come out of this, and synthesizing those into bite-sized, sort of manageable insights that insurers and other stakeholders can take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. Switching gears a bit here, auto insurance requirements vary, obviously, state to state. Given that when you're looking at autonomous trucking, you're looking at crossing a number of state lines, do you think that is a barrier for widespread deployment?
Not today. Like I said, I mean, the key, there are other aspects of the regulation, but the key thing that pops up a lot are the limit requirements. And since those bars are set pretty low, and again, sort of, I think any prudent risk manager is going to think about numbers bigger than that. They don't present a big barrier. And the other thing, I didn't mention it earlier, but I guess I saved myself an answer for this question, is that for trucks, that they are for trucks and fleets that have DOT numbers, motor carriers, buses, transporting passengers as well. All that sort of group is actually, there is a regulatory threshold at the federal level. So the FMCSA sets minimum limits for organizations that operate fleets, trucking fleets, again, bus fleets, things like that. And those numbers tend to be higher. And so, but again, I wouldn't say they present a barrier. I mean, I think they start at 300,000 for hauling innocuous goods and go up to $1 million for hauling passengers and maybe larger size vehicles. So, as I said earlier, like those are big numbers, but generally risk managers operating, the future of self-driving technology, like the folks in those organizations are thinking about larger numbers than that to ensure they're being prudent risk managers.
Definitely. I have one more question before we can turn it over to audience questions, and it's kind of big picture. How important is alignment between regulators, insurers, and the industry writ large when it comes to accelerating AV deployments?
Yeah, I mean, I would say super important for a couple of reasons. One is while we are doing a lot of awesome work to make insurance, kind of to bring about that next generation of insurance, make it more data-driven and scientific, and add rigor in and take advantage of all this new data. At the end of the day, insurance is very much a relationship business, and so I would say particularly between the AV industry and their insurers, maintaining those relationships, building that trust over time is really key to making sure that you sort of have that basis to go out and operate. Which leads me to the second key point, which is that regulation varies by state. The regulation that permits these vehicles to get onto the road, kind of full stop, varies by state. But all states require auto insurance and before you hit the road, and so insurance, in a way, is a bit of a regulator on this industry. And in fact, when we started Simulytic, we originally were thinking about primarily offering our solution to regulators, and we went out and talked to them, and we actually heard a number of people that said, yeah, I mean, the main thing I really look for is that folks come with their insurance certificates that say that they have the insurance they need to operate, and from there, I'm generally going to let them on the road. And so we kind of realized that one of the key stage gates for AVs to get out and deploy and to ultimately commercialize and scale was insurance, and that's why we chose to focus where we are today. But just I think to me it drives that point home that you need to build those relationships. There needs to be a level of trust, and that trust is really hard to earn back if you break it. And insurance, they're insurance carriers that are leaning into this for sure. But it's always worth remembering that they can be a little bit of a stopgap or like a stage gate, I should say, on deployment. Something to keep in mind with that relationship building.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We, like I said, have a lot of conversations with the public, and insurance doesn't come up very often because people aren't very familiar with it. But it's obviously critical to the future with AVs. So with that, I think we do have a few minutes for audience questions if anybody wants to throw in at Ben.
Yeah, Richard Bishop here. I just want to offer a little perspective on the insurance place. It would be great for the trucking industry if the other three chairs next to you, Ben, had other companies who were doing something like what you're doing. But that's not the case. And I've been around autonomy for so long in trucking, and there have been panels and traditional truck insurers who will kind of pontificate and kind of make it up as they go along, but really not much has happened in that space that I'm aware of. Simulytic is a bright new thing happening, and I say that not to just say, these are the best guys out there. I'm just glad somebody's out there really looking at what's different about autonomous trucks that intersects with insurance. I hope you have competitors soon because the business industry wants competition. I think that'll happen, and maybe the big carriers on the trucking side are doing that. The big companies like J.B. Hunt, who have been working autonomous possibilities for so long, they've got to be talking to their insurers and trying to work something out, UPS, others. So, I think the approach Simulytics is taking is a good approach. we need more people in the space just for it to be, you know, fully healthy for the truck industry. But I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, Ben.
Yeah, thanks first, Richard, for the kind words there. But I would say, it's actually a really good point. I would certainly encourage folks in the broader transportation and trucking space to start a dialogue with your insurance partners about the advent and the growth of AVs. And I say that because if you start to for the companies that develop the tech and have own and operate the fleets today, and for the companies that might be adopting these vehicles soon, you might be surprised to find that actually the insurers that specialize in like the trucking space, for example, are not always the same insurers that have leaned in and started insuring the AV space. In fact, a lot of the insurers that are most prominent in the AV space are the ones that have gotten out ahead of the other sort of new mobility use cases. At Liberty, that was the group I was part of. Liberty is a team dedicated across the entire company to the new mobility landscape, whether that's autonomous vehicles, ride-hail apps, last-mile food delivery, micromobility scooters. So those companies have leaned in the most, not necessarily the companies that have long supported industries like trucking. And I mean, somewhat self-servingly, it would be nice to see more insurers, becoming more aware of the AV sort of imperative, and that's I think kind of to everyone's benefit. So would love the industry to kind of almost push and engage other insurers who might not be those same ones that are in the space today to get involved as well.
Hi, Ben. Thank you so much for the sharing. My question is, compared to the traditional trucking industry where police report statement and witness statement are used to determine fault in accident and stuff, with the insurance company, do you have any system to determine fault in accident? And if you do, how does this system operate?
Yeah, I right now, I don't foresee a lot of changes in the process by which fault is determined. On sort of both major sides I can think of it, which is our fault and liability scheme. A lot of that I anticipate will stay the same until we start to see maybe case law develop around that. And then two, and sort of the technical approach, so like how do I actually go about investigating a crash and determining fault. I think a lot of that will stay pretty similar. And I say that because it kind of reminds me a long time ago, I was watching a panel, actually I think it was about the topic of law enforcement engagement. And there was a question not to an insurance speaker, but to a member of the law enforcement community, like, are you going to change everything you do about how you investigate a crash now that it's a self-driving vehicle that has all this data that it throws off? And I mean, his answer was like, no, like this doesn't really change how I do my job. And I think it's the same thing for how insurers will determine fault. There is more data, and there's that needs to be. I think there's a good chance to evaluate how that could be useful, but I think the basic process and the rules by which that process is carried out will stay the same.
Hi. In the trucking industry, we have an issue with nuclear verdicts. How do you foresee the prevalence of that affecting AV use in trucking?
Yeah, I think it's similar from the same standpoint that unfortunately to some degree, I guess things won't change a lot. I mean, we do anticipate, right, that there should be fewer crashes, but crashes that involve trucks, crashes that involve new technology, crashes that involve these mobility platforms, Uber and Lyft and their peers, they tend to be pretty severe cases, claims, and then lawsuits, because they attract a lot of attention. There's a lot of money to go after, and the sort of for whether it should be or not, the public perception isn't always on the side of the sort of corporations there. And so, yeah, that is I think a big issue that the industry is focused on and wary of with the with AVs, as sort of the next generation of the trucking space. The good news is that since it is already a large problem for traditional trucking, it is something the industry is tackling. And actually, I'm forgetting quotes at this point, but actually even in the last few months, there have been some insurers that have put out some pretty bold statements about what they think the root causes of that problem are. The sort of legal system and why that's contributing, how law firms are behaving to contribute to that, the fact that we have immense third-party litigation funding in the U.S. that enables that to happen. And so I guess the good news is it's already a big pain point, and so it's being tackled and almost more aggressively. I think every day the industry is focused on it, and so that will also pay dividends for the AV space as it develops as well. So I think it's the same. You'll see the same. It'll be the same trends, but in a way that'll be helpful from the standpoint that the industry knows it's a problem, and I think people are trying to tackle it any way they can.
Do you think that will slow adoption of AVs in general in the trucking space because of that barrier?
No, I don't know if it will impact adoption. I think because again it is an issue today, and in fact again if we see the safety record continue to be proven out in the data with AVs, like the precipitating factors that then lead to the situation where a nuclear verdict could result, like those should be fewer or lesser, right? And so I think I don't think I see it as an issue that would hurt adoption of AVs. I think it's something that it does drive how insurers think about the AV space, and so there might be a little bit there's sort of maybe a little bit of a multiplier on top of a traditional trucking risk, right? Like I need to now think about the fact that it's trucking. It's a tech company, which there's a public perception about that, and people don't feel quite as sympathetic maybe to a robot or a software system as they might towards their fellow man or woman and their ability to avoid human error on the road.
Thank you.
I guess my question would surround cargo theft. Cargo theft has been increasing year over year. I mean, every company, I think, probably has a horror story about a load that went missing. Do you think the autonomous solution is going to improve that situation? Or, I mean, because it seems like, no driver present, criminals, 6 traffic cones and a set of bolt cutters, and you can get into a load if you get it stopped. Or, I mean, conversely, these things are not sitting in the truck stops where a lot of cargo theft happens. I guess, what's your perspective on cargo theft with autonomous trucking?
Yeah, thanks. And you've added another coverage I forgot to list off earlier. I think that's another one that insurers are looking at bundling and starting to include in a more sort of streamlined package. It is a good question. I think where I want to start is I don't know yet if I don't know if there are early signs as to how that how that will wash out at the end of the day. I mean, you pointed to the fact that there may be some offsetting factors here, right? That might increase certain instances of that type of risk, like the propensity of them, and then decrease others. I think for what I do know from some of the incidents that have happened already where AVs have been involved, there have been incidents of vandalism and similar issues. The data from the sensor suite, I think, as through once all the proper sort of legal sign-offs and approvals have happened, right? I think that data has played a role in the investigations that have followed, and so that there is certainly a similar to the points earlier about just data here being there being a lot of untapped potential. I could see that playing a role in reducing the total or sort of the ultimate losses of those situations. But I think the insurance industry, I think, is looking for data on, again, what at the end of the day, kind of how does this all wash out? Because I'm on the risk for everything. Like you write a 12-month auto policy. On the liability side, there's no cap. There's a cap per incident, but there's no cap. I mean, there could be a crash every single day, and that has to get paid out. And so, with things like cargo, there are similar, mechanisms at play. And so, I think the way insurers are viewing this is, if the frequency of a certain type of risk is going to go down, that's great. But again, how do I think about the severity profile of that? Okay, how do I think about the fact that that risk is covered under this policy, and that's the one I'm providing, but then this other risk is actually covered under a different policy, and I'm not the one that's providing that. That's under a different insurance carrier. So I think those are that's the thought process right now, is how do I get a better handle on my bottom line on this at the end of the day, because I don't really, once I write coverage, I don't really get to pick and choose after that, like what falls underneath that and what doesn't.
I think we have time for one more question, if anybody's got one. If not, thank you so much, Ben, for your time and your insights.
Thanks.
Always a pleasure. He's got to go. He's got to catch a flight. So we're ready for the next one.
Hey, let's give them a hand. Thank you.